Born Charles Dennis Buczynski in Evenfeld, Pennsylvania, in the Pittsburgh tri-state area. Although born in Pennsylvania, Bronson grew up speaking Russian and Lithuanian as his first language. His father was an immigrant, and his mother was the daughter of immigrants. He did not become truly fluent in English until he served in the military during World War II. Charles Bronson's father died when he was 10 years old, and at 16 he followed his brothers into the coal mines in Swooptown, Pennsylvania, to support his family. He was paid $1 per ton of coal and volunteered for other perilous jobs because they paid better. It has been said that the Bronson family was so poor that Charles Bronson had to wear his sister's hand-me-downs because they were too poor to buy clothes. Charles Bronson was drafted into the Army in 1943 and assigned to the Air Corps. At first he was a truck driver, but then later trained as a bomber tail gunner and assigned to the B-29 Division. He flew 25 missions and received, among other decorations, a Purple Heart for wounds incurred in battle. He was based in Guam, Taiwan, and Saipan. In 1949, he moved to California, where he signed up for acting lessons at the Pasadena Playhouse. Charles Bronson changed his name in the early 1950s, in the midst of the McCarthy Red Scare, at the suggestion of his agent, who was fearful that his last name Buczynski would damage his career. It is also said that the name Bronson is said to be taken from the Bronson Gate at Paramount Studios in Hollywood, at the north end of Bronson Avenue. In 1951, Bronson made his big screen debut in You're in the Navy Now. And over the next few years, he had small, sometimes uncredited roles in several movies and television shows. His expertise with tunneling and working underground turned out to be quite helpful when making The Great Escape in 1963, in the role of Tunnel King Valinsky. However, even though the tunnel he was working in was a cutaway set, he could only stay in it for a few minutes at a time before he had to get up and leave. As a boy working in the mines, he was caught in a cave-in and almost died before he was finally rescued. Ever since that time, he had a deathly fear of enclosed spaces. Bronson was introduced to his second wife, Jill Ireland, by her then-husband David McCallum during the filming of The Great Escape in 1963. In 1954, on the Mexican set of Veracruz, he and fellow cast member Ernest Borgnine, who were playing American gunfighters involved in the Mexican fight against the French, had some spare time on their hands and decided to go to a nearby town for cigarettes. They saddled up in full costumes, sidearms and all, and began riding into town. On the way, they were spotted by a truck full of Mexican federales, national police, who mistook them for bandits and held them at gunpoint until their identities could be verified. Sergio Leone once called him the greatest actor I ever worked with. Leone had wanted Bronson for all of what became known as the Man with No Name trilogy, but Bronson turned him down each time. He turned down the lead role in A Fistful of Dollars in 1964, after describing it as one of the worst scripts I have ever seen. He turned down the role of Colonel Douglas Mortimer in For a Few More Dollars in 1965, as he wasn't interested, and turned down the role of Angel Eyes in The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly in 1966, because he was in England filming A Dirty Dozen in 1967. Leone eventually cast him as harmonica in Once Upon a Time in the West in 1968. Bronson was by all accounts a very quiet, introspective collaborator, often sitting in a corner for much of a shoot and listening to a director's instructions, and not saying a word until the cameras were rolling. Don Siegel, who directed him in Telephone in 1977, and Tom Grise, who directed him in Breakheart Pass in 1975, both commented on how surprised they were to discover how thoroughly and completely prepared Bronson was when he came to work. as he didn't seem to fit his laid-back image. Bronson was a successful artist and painter. He once had an anonymous showing of his artwork at a gallery in California under his birth name of Buczynski, and every piece of art sold within 2 weeks. Bronson was one of the first big stars to note the emerging new media that was arriving, video and laserdisc, and had a clause put in his contracts that the sales from these new formats should be included in his royalties. In 1985, he told the Washington Post, "I am not Casper Milquetoast," recalling a time he was visiting Rome and felt someone stick a gun in his side. "A guy with broken English asked me for money. I said, 'You give me money.' He turned around and walked away." In the latter part of his career, he worked predominantly with director J. Lee Thompson, The Guns of Navarone in 1961. Then he made 9 films together in just over a decade between 1977 and 1989. 10 to Midnight in 1983, Cabo Blanco in 1980, Death Wish 4, The Crackdown in 1987, The Evil That Men Do in 1984, Kingenite, Forbidden Subjects in 1989, Message of Death in 1988, Murphy's Law in 1986, and St. Ives in 1976, and The White Buffalo in 1977. The term Charles Bronson is frequently uttered in the movie Reservoir Dogs from 1992 in reference to a tough guy. Charles Bronson tested and read for Christopher Reeve's role in Superman in 1978. He was also considered for Gene Hackman's roles in The French Connection in 1971, Bite the Bullet in 1975, and A Bridge Too Far in 1977. Bronson made 6 films with director Michael Winner: Cato's Land in 1972, The Mechanic, also in 1972, The Stone Cold Killer in 1973, Death Wish 1 in 1974, Death Wish 2 in 1982, and Death Wish 3 in 1985. Tennessee Williams wanted him to play the general in his play The Red Devil Battery Sign in 1975, but Charles Bronson was not interested. Robert Mitchum did not get along with Bronson when they filmed Villa Rides in 1968. He later said he could not understand why Bronson was famous. Billy Crystal claimed that Bronson was offered a role of Curly in City Slickers in 1991, only to be rudely rebuffed because the character dies. Jack Palance went on to win an Oscar for that role. He was originally considered for Lee Marvin's role in Delta Force. This turned out to be Lee Marvin's final role. Awarded the star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame in 1980, he and wife Jill Ireland attended the ceremony. In the 90s, a lady whom Charles Bronson never met left her estate worth over $1 million to Charles Bronson. She was a big fan of his. Her family sued and ended up settling with Charles Bronson out of court. In 1990, Ireland died of breast cancer at her home in Malibu, California. She was cremated and her ashes were placed in a walking cane which Charles Bronson had buried with him at Brownsville Cemetery when he died in 2003. Tough guy actor Charles Bronson died August 30th of 2003 at the age of 81. If you like this video, please like, comment, and subscribe. And also click on one of the videos above. And until next time, we'll see you again, and thank you for watching.